Hello everyone, my name is Gustin. I'm a studio artist in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, and emeritus professor at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. I'm having a solo exhibition at the Workhouse Art Center, and my task today is to try to talk about it a little bit without being in that space. And unfortunately, due to the situation going around the country, we have to experience this from a digital perspective. So I'm going to try to talk about the work, give you a little background, and maybe what I'm doing right now. My work started out years ago as a studio potter. I made functional pots, and then as time went by, I started to get interested in things other than utility. And from that point, I moved into more of a sense of abstraction and caricature. So the forms got a little bigger, and things started to move a bit. But as things did that, some ideas shifted, and those ideas were based on not just use and kind of questions of use, but also how an object might speak towards analogy and emotion. So in the late 90s, I built a wood kiln, and most of my work from that point on has been revolving around wood firing, though I do some gas firing, and in the exhibition there are a few pieces from the gas kilns. One of the things one of the questions that really interested me early on was the issue of scale, and how scale can afford a conversation where you begin to shift scales, conversation change, perception changes about how one sees an object. So what started it all was the idea of working off a tea bowl. So this is like a large kind of cocoa bowl, if you will, something you could drink out of. You can put things in it. But as you can tell, this is a bit large, right? But the question I had was, well, let's try to make this 4 feet tall and then see how you think about it. And so you take drinking out of the conversation, now it becomes a completely different object. And so that type of thinking has informed my work since the early 2000s. Take something small, an idea in functional pottery small, and just really jack up the scale. And then how to fire it. I was interested in the conversation between glaze and form, and how those two different systems, if you will, can affect how somebody experiences what they see in front of them. So the form, I was working out of the vessel context, and the forms just got very large. And once they got large, I realized that I wanted glaze to really speak to the topography of that form. I didn't want it to just sit on top of the form. I wanted it to react to the form. So I developed all these glazes that moved, that were very wet, almost no aluminum in them. So they just rolled off the pots. And in doing so, I was able to begin to create surfaces in the wood kiln that really spoke of the form underneath the glaze, the slight movements and gestures of that clay moving in and out of space. Dimples, belly buttons, shoulders, pockets, creases, these types of things where liquid collects and disperses through and rolls over. And that led to more of a investigation of analogy. So, this reminds me of that type of thing. And that's really an important thing to try to talk about because analogy leads one to memory, and memory is emotive. And so my work is interested in trying to figure out or trying to create a space where a viewer can bring their own life experiences into an object and reflect in a way that is personal to them. So scale, form, gesture, color, all these things have led into it. And the tools I use are clay, which are basically stoneware and porcelain, and the wood kiln, and sometimes the gas kiln. The gas kiln I'm using pretty much now only if the pieces are too large and I can't get them in the wood kiln. But I do fire some small pieces in gas for specific glazes. The work in the show reflects a transition point from a couple of years ago, and that point was when I decided to shift from how I begin a piece. And once I did that, and working on a large scale, the forms started to enclose themselves. I couldn't figure out how to keep them as a vessel. So they started to become pure sculptural form, and that just opened a huge door. So the pieces in the show are really an investigation into a group of different scales, from very small to large, exploring this idea of emotive form that has a connection to body, form that has a connection to topography, and a form that is emotive in a way that sensuality. And I'm hoping by doing that, we can create a conversation with a viewer that is reflective on their own experiences. The other pieces in the show are platters and tea bowls. Platters come out of taking the large vessel forms from the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and taking them and then unfolding them. It's as if you just cut them up and just laid them out, and giving them the context of the charger or the platter. So those pieces were made between, 2014, 2015, and 2019, I believe, in the exhibition. So there's a group of them. I think there's 8 there, and I hope you get a chance to look at them. There's a different sense of topography in them. They start to become landscape as well as body, which I find interesting. And then the other pieces in the show are tea bowls. And I make the tea bowls and the little whiskey cups and drinking vessels because I want a sense of intimacy. I want to go back to kind of the hand holding something instead of the hand maybe basically caressing something. So it's a different door in, it's a different avenue of investigation, different sense of intimacy, and I'm enjoying working between all of them, and moving from pots to sculpture to tea bowls to whiskey cups back to large sculpture. This shift of scale, this shift of intention in the studio, where I'm not just driven by one point of view, is something that I really feed off of. So that's my work. I hope you do get to go to see the show. You can see it online through workhousearts.org, and it's been great to do it. I'm sorry that we weren't able to have the opening or have the reception event, but there is a way to see it, and I hope you enjoyed what I've been talking about. Thanks a lot.